Most of the changes involve things on the site layout, so let's open that up. It's in app views layout application.html.erb. And this file is fine for our current purposes, just getting started, but this is not an industrial strength application layout. It has the essential elements, of course. It's got the doc type here, which is HTML, and this is short for HTML5. We've got the HTML tag, got a head, body, got our title with the full title helper that we added in the last lesson. Then some embedded Ruby for the style sheets, JavaScript, and then this thing that you don't really need to know about, but it's protecting against something called cross-site request forgery. Part of the philosophy of the Rails tutorial is to build a professional-grade application. So that means that I include things that I wouldn't include if I were just giving you enough information to get started. So this really is the beginning in this lesson of developing the full sample application. So this is where it's really going to start coming together. We got started in lesson 3 with some basics, and then in the last lesson we took a detour and learned some more Ruby. But this is where it really starts becoming a real full-fledged industrial strength professional grade application. However you want to say it, whatever metaphor you want to use. This is the real stuff. And in that spirit, what we're going to do here is add something in the head to improve the compatibility of our site with some older browsers, especially older versions of Internet Explorer. So to that end, I'm going to include some strange looking code. It starts like this. This is actually an HTML comment, or an opening comment, and we can put the closing one in. The syntax highlighting will tell us that we've done it right. And inside this comment, I'm going to put some code that is specific to Internet Explorer. This will be ignored by any other browser. So if LT, that's less than, so if the browser is less than IE9, then I'm going to include a script. This is a JavaScript that exists on a CDN, or a content distribution network. And this is the kind of thing that you really would never type in yourself. You would find this somewhere on the internet, and from a source presumably that you trust, and then you'd paste it in. So I'm going to end the script, and then I'm going to put the source in. And I'm just going to paste it in from the Rails tutorial itself. Here it is. Oops, I actually selected the SRC part, didn't I? So let's just put that in. And then the closing angle bracket. You should probably just copy the whole thing. It's much less error prone, but I wanted to show you some of the elements as they're built up. And then there's this thing at the end. So you are not expected to understand this. I don't understand this. This is, I mean, I can infer what it must be doing, but this is the sort of thing that you find it from a source you trust and you paste it in. And what this does is that it ensures that some older browsers will work well with our current HTML5 doc type. As a next step, I want to add the header. I'm going to start adding in this stuff here at the top of the mockup. That's not the same thing as head. It's the head of the document. But this is an actual header that's going to live inside the body tag and will actually be displayed. So we can start it like this. I'll show you several different ways to make HTML with the Cloud IDE here. Most text editors have shortcuts for making HTML. So we can start with this header, and I'm going to give it a series of CSS classes. So CSS is cascading style sheets. It's the language for determining HTML styling for browsers. And a class is just a label. It can be used multiple times on a page, and you can actually give a particular element multiple classes separated by spaces. So let's do that. So the classes here are navbar, navbar fixed top, navbar inverse. These class names are specific to a CSS framework we're going to be using called Bootstrap. So by using these CSS classes, we'll arrange for styling to appear automatically. By the way, you may have noticed there when I typed in this closing angle bracket, the closing tag appeared automatically. It's very convenient. I can also hit return and it will indent and do everything very nicely for me. So inside this header, I'm going to use a generic HTML division called div. So I can type div and then hit tab, and it will start a tag for me. I can hit return, and now I'm going to give it a class. This is a container. Again, this is a Bootstrap CSS class. And inside this division, I'm going to link to the sample app logo. That's this part up here. It's just going to be text, and we'll style it using CSS. Now, at this point, we could use just an anchor tag, right, like this. But it's conventional to use embedded Ruby, and that especially lets us use what are called named routes. We'll be talking about that a lot in this lesson. So this is some embedded Ruby. The equal sign, remember, indicates that it will actually be inserted into the template, not just evaluated as Ruby, but the result of evaluating what's inside here will be inserted into the template. And here I'm going to use the link to helper, which is a Rails helper for making links. And it takes, well, remember, it's just a function, so I'm leaving off parentheses here. We could put this in parentheses like this. But it's conventional in this context to leave them off. Link to sample app, you can see it's lowercase. We'll actually upcase that thing using CSS. And the second argument is the place it actually links to. Now we could actually do this. We could do like slash or slash static pages slash home. This would work. If we refresh this, you can see here that this actually does just link back to the home page. But that's not as flexible, and in general, in Rails apps, we use named routes, as I mentioned briefly before, and we'll be talking about what those are in a moment. So at this point, I actually don't want to put in the link. It'd be especially easy to forget to change it. So there's a convention in web design, which is to just stub it out using the hash sign. So this is a link that doesn't go anywhere. It's just a reminder that we want to fill it in with a named route later on. Now there's a complement to CSS classes, which is CSS IDs. So we could do something like this. This also lets you style it, but it can appear only once on the page. So this is something that should be unique. And in this context, I'm going to give it an ID because I only want the logo to appear once on the page. I'm going to say ID is logo. Right, so this is an options hash here at the end. We can type this. This would work just as well. So if we inspect that element, we can see that it has a href equals the octothorpe or the hash sign, ID equals logo. That's coming from here. But we don't actually want the curly braces there because, again, conventionally, we leave them off if we can. Refresh it, and it's the same thing. The next step is to fill in those header links. So here is like home, help, login, that sort of stuff. So that's a list of links, and I'm going to put it inside a navigation tag or nav tag. And the list of links itself, I suppose we could make an ordered list, but it's conventional in this context to use an unordered list, or UL. So UL, I'm going to give it some classes. Again, this is for Bootstrap. And then each list item, or LI, will be a link. Say li, and then I'm going to use embedded Ruby again, like here. Use link to. So let's have a link to the home page. Oops. It's useful, you can see the syntax highlighting is telling us that there's still something missing. Link to help. Just stubbing them out for now. Oops. And let's link to the login page. This will be stubbed out for quite a while until lesson 8. And I like to line these things up just by putting spaces in. Looks a little cleaner. The next part of the page is just the body, or like the main body. This is all inside the body, the header here, but now this is just the page that we're yielding. And for CSS purposes, I also want this to be inside a container div. Now one of the cool things I can do here is do div.container, and we'll see that this dot notation is how you style classes inside of a CSS file. But in the context of this IDE, if I do div.container and then hit tab, it fills it in for me. It's pretty cool. Just cut it here. All right, let's take a look at it. All right, you can see we've got our links here. They're just this little list. And of course, what we're going to do is we're going to move these up over here and make them look more like this guy, the mock-up. That all happens with CSS though. So this structure is logical in the sense that this is a list, this is a link with an ID, and then there's this material in the middle. So as long as we've got this logical structure, where we've got the right tags, we can make it look different using CSS. Of course, we haven't touched the actual home page, so let's take a look at that. Again, that's an app views static pages home.html.drb. Oops, I clicked on the wrong one, didn't I? There we go. Okay, here's the sample app homepage. Let's start filling this in. I want to put this inside of a div, and I'm going to use some bootstrap classes. Let's do class equals, I'm going to center it, and I'm going to use something called Jumbotron. Kind of funny. And then let's say this is going to say welcome to the sample app. And I'm going to put a second level heading. So there's an H1 there. Let's put it in H2 as well. There we go. And let's make a link to that sign up button. It's this here, sign up now. And I'm going to stub it out for now, the actual link. But I'm going to give it some classes. Now we saw here that we could define an ID using this key value pair, this options hash. So again, we can do ID equals and then something, whatever we want it to be. In this case, we're going to put in the CSS classes, also using a key value pair. So this is class, button, button large, button primary. And I'm going to put all of this stuff inside this Jumbotron center. Put it in here. And I like to indent it just to indicate the structure. So if you highlight it and then tab, it'll indent it. And finally, I want to show you how to link to an image. And I'm going to use the Rails logo itself for this. So let's do that. This is outside of the div. So to link to an image, you use image tag. And in this context, if I were to put the name of the file, which as we'll see is rails.ping, now this is looking weird because we've got a link to and then a spaced image tag and then a space. And in some contexts, you'll actually get an error message or a warning message. So it's good to leave off the parentheses. Typically, this is a very idiomatically correct line of Ruby or embedded Ruby. But in this context, it's a good idea to add in the parentheses so that it's not ambiguous. So there's an image tag, and then image tags have an alt attribute. This is the alternative. This is what gets displayed, for example, for screen readers for the sight impaired. So let's do Alt, just call it Rails logo, closing it there. And then this is the thing we're linking to, and then we also need the actual URL. So you can see, well, maybe you can see it, there's this subtle line. I really don't like going beyond this AD columns if I can avoid it. So I'm going to put in a new line here. There we go. Let's take a look at our page. So you can see all the elements are there except for this image. It used to be that the Rails logo was included with Rails, but now we have to download it separately. And this behavior is browser dependent, so on Chrome it just shows a little broken image. So I'm going to grab that image off the web. There are a bunch of different ways to do this. You can just visit the URL I'm about to show you and use your browser. But I'm going to use a really cool command line facility called curl. This lets me hit a URL at the command line. I'm going to download it with -o. -o. I always get this wrong. Is it 0 or O? It's curl-o. And then this is the URL. It's rubyonrails.org /images/rails.ping. So this will download that file unless I got the 0 or the O wrong. There we go. It is -o. Let's take a look at what this is. So you can see here on the left, it downloaded it, but that's not the right location. So the right location for images is an app asset images. You can see it's empty right now, so we're just going to move it there. Move rails.ping to app assets images. And you might wonder, well, where's app assets here? App assets images? It's not anywhere. It's just the name of the file. And the answer is image tag takes care of that for us. So as long as we put this image in a place where Rails can find it, it will find it. And if we refresh this, we should see it. There we go. There's the Rails logo. We can inspect this to see what its location is. You can see that it's in /assets/Rails, and then this crazy string, .ping. This crazy stuff is put in by Rails. This is essentially a way to make it possible to force browsers to refresh their caches. So if we were to change this image, for example, this string would change, the string of digits and letters. So this is just a little trick. It's not important though. One of the nice things about using Rails is it takes care of all those sorts of details.